All right. Okay, people are trickling in here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to today's Scrum Pulse. I am Lindsay Valacina here at Scrum.org. I'm just going to be moderating our session today. Super excited to have one of our professional Scrum trainers, Simon Reindl, here. He is going to talk about the Scrum accountabilities at scale. So kind of an exciting topic. Actually, it is an exciting topic. I don't know why I said kind of, but so
Kind of
let's
scary.
let's get started. So can you go to the next slide, please, Simon? Okay, so just some quick guidelines. You'll notice that your microphone is muted. However, we highly encourage you to ask questions. So you can utilize the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you have technical questions, you can reach out to me in the chat and I can field those questions that way. We try to keep the Q&A and the chat separate. So I will help you as much as I can from a technical standpoint, and we will get your questions answered as well. We don't have time for all the questions. We're going to figure out a way to address them later. So next slide, please. Okay, so very quickly, who is Scrum.org? So we are the home of Scrum. We were founded by Ken Schwaber back in 2009. He is one of the co-creators of Scrum. And our mission is to help people and teams solve complex problems. And we do that through our training, certification, and ongoing learning. There's a lot of free learning right on our website to continue your learning journey. So please make sure you take advantage of that. You're already taking advantage of a piece of that by attending today's webinar, so that's great. And I hope today's session plays a part in that journey. And I'll kick it over to you, Simon, to introduce yourself and get us started.
Thanks, Lindsay. Hello, everyone. My name's Simon Reindl. I'm a professional Scrum trainer. I've been doing the Scrum stuff as a Scrum trainer since 2010, and I've been doing Scrum or Agile since very early 2000s, late 90s, 2000s. I've worked with startups through to multinationals. Another thing I'm very interested in is lean agile procurement. So that has a lot of interaction with the Scrum stuff. So today I'm going to explore Scrum accountabilities at scale, and I'm going to include leadership as one of the accountabilities, because when it comes to scaling, all bets are off. Now, in my opinion, it doesn't matter which scaling framework you start with, you're going to have to customize it. And to do that, I'd like to share two core models. And I use these models to think about how we can interact. And the first one is how we show up as leaders, how we show up as team members. And the first thing is we all need to be clear on our purpose. We need to make sure we know our purpose and we communicate that purpose to other people. And that means not just what we're going to do, but the manner in which we do it. So if we say we're going to do things in a Scrum way, it means we're going to live the Agile values. The second thing is be clear about the constraints. What are the boundaries we're working in? There's always going to be some sort of edge that you're going to hit to. Now, in a scaled organization, when you've got so many people working together, it is even more important that you know where your boundaries are. What are you allowed to do? What's someone else's task? And the third thing is trust. Now, the more we deliver, the more trust we have. And there is a correlation between constraints and trust in that the more trust we have, the looser the constraints are, because our leadership knows that we're going to come and ask them if things get a bit hazy. The second model, I think, is the heart of agility, and that is the way we at Scrum.org talk about empiricism and empirical process control. I like to think of it in terms of a tree because it's an organic flow. The roots of the tree are the Scrum values. And being a Star Wars fan, I love to say use the force: focus, openness, respect, courage, and commitment. When we live that, we build trust. The trust builds transparency. And with that, we can have inspection and adaptation. Now, the key is to be able to adapt quickly when needed. And that's based on fast feedback loops. So if we do this, we're being agile. Now, the key with scaling is to get that feedback loop to work at scale. So what do I mean by scale? If we have one team and one product, that's typically where we use Scrum. If you have one team supporting many products, it's a challenge. And a lot of teams are in this space. This is typically an operational team or a support team, and using a flow-based method, using visualization, using Kanban to understand your work and manage it better can help you deal with that. But today I want to explore scaling in the terms of scaled Scrum. So that is many teams working together on one product, and also portfolio enterprise stuff where you have many teams and many products. And so this is flipping it from a project-based organization to a product-based organization, meaning we're focusing on customer outcomes. Now, the core, from our perspective at Scrum.org, scaled Scrum is still Scrum. And the focus of Scrum is to get things done. And that means that our accountabilities then need to support the scaled objective of getting stuff done at scale. So the core accountability of leadership is to foster an environment where people can deliver. Your product owner needs to be able to communicate effectively to many teams so we can maximize the value from, there's a typo there, I've got to fix that, from the work of the Scrum team. The developers need to focus on delivering a usable, done, integrated increment. So that means we need to work with the other teams to make sure that we get to done regularly and consistently. And the Scrum Master, you're still looking at Scrum team effectiveness, but you're also now looking at how your teams work together effectively. So when it comes to scaling, the law of one kicks in. If we have one product, there should be one product owner, one person who is accountable for the value that product delivers. Now, how they delegate that accountability and understanding to the teams is up to them. But to make it clear what's going on, there should be only one product backlog. The number of times I've seen people, teams, large groups get into trouble when there's 3 or 4 places to look for work, how do you know which stack to pull from? There should be one clear definition of done that all teams have to meet, and that results in one increment. If you honor the law of one, then you can say we're using something like the Nexus framework, and you'll see that Nexus applies the principles of Scrum at scale. So you'll notice that as we scale, we can bring in complementary practices to help coordinate the work across the team. Now, the challenge with scaling is always going to be getting that integrated increment done. And there's 3 things we're looking at. Dependencies. These could be technical, it could be information, it could be waiting for another team's work, it could be getting a sign-off or an approval, getting things through legal, etc. These are all dependencies, either business or technical. Making sure your work integrates, builds, and doesn't mess up another team's work. So integrating that into one coherent product so that it can be released is absolutely critical. This means we're going to have to automate stuff. And then organizationally, being able to make impediments visible and resolve them quickly. Now, the faster we can resolve them, the faster we can get value to flow through our system. Now, the challenge with scaling, the more people you add, the harder it is to share information accurately. Why? Because humans. How easy is it to misunderstand, mishear, miscommunicate? There's a funny quote from one of my favorite authors, Terry Pratchett. A lie can run around the world before the truth has got its boots on. And this happens. Like we see it in organizations all the time where rumor control gets a word of something, and it's not accurate. And so what we need to be thinking about as we are scaling, how do we ensure our leadership hears accurate information, and how do we ensure that accurate communication around your organization is held? Now, traditionally, scaling in the Western world is yet another thing the Romans gave to us. So what have the Romans done for us, apart from roads, schools, aqueducts, concrete? Well, they also gave us the scaling pattern that applied all the way through to the age of information. And this scaling pattern is hierarchical. So in the Roman army, a group of 10 people was a contubernium, or a tent group, and they were the basic functional unit of the Roman army. You got 10 of them together and you had a cohort. You get 10 of them together, you have a legion. And so we ended up with this hierarchical structure. And we see this in standard org charts throughout our organizations. Now, if we're moving to a product-centric scaling pattern, what we're trying to do is get information to flow throughout the organization and decisions to be made as close to the information as possible. This means that we're going to have an adaptive scaling model. We start seeing our organization less hierarchically and more as a collection of nodes. Now, each node should be focusing on delivering an outcome, and they will be integrated and mixed and working together. Now, it could be a functional area or a product area. This organizational design needs to be suited to your organization, your context, and the challenge that you're solving. And this is the key. When we scale, you will have to choose practices and techniques suitable for your organization, your product, your context. You have to be very aware of both formal and informal communication channels. Because of that opportunity for information to be transmitted around the organization, the closer we can get our formal and informal channels to be together and aligned, the more accurate our information will communicate. So for scaling to be effective, it means information needs to flow quickly around our organization and decisions have to be made in a timely manner. The more people involved, the more expensive a delay to a decision is. So if you think your Scrum team of 10 people have to wait a day for a decision, well, you've just lost 10 people days. If we scale that up to the next level and we have 10 teams, we've just lost 100 people days. We keep scaling and all of a sudden we can lose people years due to an inability to communicate accurately and make decisions. And so how does this play into the accountabilities? Well, there's a great saying that a fish rots from the head down. And this is where leadership have to step into the place to be able to create the environment for information to flow and decisions to be made. And it's challenging. There's a dichotomy here. There needs to be a clear direction, a clear focus on purpose and value, and being able to provide that without micromanaging or even worse, nano-managing. And this is one of the side effects of agile theater. When you have organizations that are applying the techniques of agile without the principles that I referred to in the bullseye model and the tree, without the Scrum values, you can get nano management, status reporting to the nth degree, and we end up with poor communication of information. So the challenge for leadership is holding, first of all, yourself, and secondly, your people and team to account for what is asked for and what is expected. Now, you can only do this if you are very clear on your vision, on your constraints and boundaries, and your expectations. If it is ambiguous, you can't hold people accountable to that. So it's really important you set the direction of travel. then you as a leader need to find out your boundaries or constraints. Only when you know that will you be able to delegate to your people objectives, constraints, and then holding people accountable for getting things done. So a leader has every right to challenge a team that isn't consistently delivering a done increment, to challenge a team that is not delivering to a certain standard. That is your accountability as a leader. Now, when we do this, to align ourselves with the Scrum values, we need to do this with compassion and curiosity. This is absolutely essential because it provides that space of safety for people to say, I need help, I need support, I need training, something's in my way. One of the most wonderful examples I have seen of this, a very senior leader observed the daily scrum of a team, waited till they finished and said, you folks mentioned an impediment. Is there anything you need from me to resolve this? At that point, the team said, no, we haven't tried solving it yet, but if we get stuck, we'll call you. That one question and the phrasing of it created such a clear communication to that team that they had support and that they were expected to try and solve the thing themselves, which is fantastic. When we scale, we need leadership at all levels. And this is really important, that the leader's focus is not trying to increase the headcount that they have, trying to say, I've got a bigger share of the pie. The function of leadership is to produce more leaders. And so when we can create the space for people to lead other people and for people to come to us and give us proposed solutions, and really they're looking for advice. When we create that situation, we know we've created a leader-based, intent-based organization, a learning organization, which is the heart of a product organization. So 4 core practices to be an effective agile leader. Promote information flow. You need to make sure that information is communicated accurately and clearly. Are you using information radiators? Are you making sure that the information that's communicated is accurate and timely? Do you use closed loop communication? Now, closed loop communication is where you have somebody say something and you play it back to them. So you just said ABC, and then that gives them the opportunity to correct you, if not, or just simply go, yeah, that's what I said. Now, when we do communicate like that, and if we create a culture of closed loop communication, it reduces mishearings and misunderstandings. Now, at scale, this is even more important because we typically start crossing cultural boundaries. And when you're working cross cultures, different cultures hear things different ways. There's assumptions, there's language shortcuts that we use. And if people are speaking in their second or third or fifth language, there's a lot of load there. There's cognitive load as they translate. So we need to communicate more effectively. As a leader, be clear on the vision. Make sure that everybody knows what the vision is, what the timeframes are, what we're expecting, where are we heading, what's our direction of travel. And then implement a few clear metrics to measure progress. For those of you who haven't heard of it, evidence-based management is a wonderful framework built to measure outcomes. And so if you have one metric in each of the 4 key value areas, you have got a light enough test to see whether you're going in the right direction. And then you as leaders need to nudge the system. And this has become harder since we've moved into a more virtual world. You need to go and see. You need to connect with the teams. You need to go to the work and see where the impediments are to help them go away. So leadership is inverted. You're there to serve the teams. The way you do that, clear direction, support the teams getting there. The next accountability, and the first formal accountability in Scrum, are product owners. Now, the challenge at scale is making sure that your product makes it into the hands of your consumer in a timely fashion. Your focus is always on value. Like the focus of the product owner is maximizing the value delivered. Now, the thing is, that value should be greater because we're at scale. Because if your Scrum team costs you 70K on average, if you have 10 Scrum teams, that's 700K a sprint on average. So it should be an exponential growth. That means that our experiments need to be more focused, more targeted, and they need to be clearer across the organization. Because we're spending more money, we really need to make sure we're connected to our organizational goals. Now, at the heart of a product owner's outlook is that thinking in bets, trying to build things in hypothesis. If we try this, what about if we run that? Do the consumer like this or that? Running experiments and being very clear that if an experiment doesn't work, that's a good thing. But if the experiment doesn't work, don't keep backing that same horse. If we're gambling and we can see that the odds are against us, stop gambling. So control your hypothesis, manage the flow of work, try and focus the teams on where the maximum value is going to be. Now, this means that you're going to have to work a lot harder at scale to make sure that we get opinions and ideas from across the organization. When we start working at this larger scale, we need to make sure we're communicating from the left-hand side where the ideas come from. So be it customer support, sales, procurement, legal, compliance, all the way through delivery to delivery and getting it to the consumer. Is it easy for your consumer to onboard? So this is where you should be investing the time and energy to see how easy it is to onboard your product. How easy is it to get hold of and use your product? Is it intuitive? Connecting to the customer at scale means you're going to have to think about putting features in your product for fast feedback loops. You're going to have to instrument so that things are automated and clearly visible. Now, that's okay if you're working in one product, but what about when we really scale and we're at a very large organization and we have multiple products? When we have a portfolio, there should be somebody who is accountable for the value delivered by the portfolio. Now, by the same logic in Scrum of having a product owner, having that single person accountable for the value that product delivers, there should be that single person who's accountable for the value of the portfolio. That means that we can think about where we're investing across all our products. And so what we're looking for is product owners to collaborate with other product owners and thinking about the optimal value for the organization. So here we're looking up and out beyond our product. We need to understand where the dependencies are across the organization and resolve them. Don't manage them. In the same way that we find impediments or bugs, the key to getting things to flow is resolving them. Make them go away. Make it easier. If it is a constraint, be very clear about the cost of that constraint so that you can determine it. And that whole principle of is the juice worth the squeeze is even more important at portfolio level because the squeeze is costing you a lot more. You'd expect a lot more juice. There should be a regular focus of your review of your portfolio. Are you making progress where you expect? What is the market doing? What's going on with changes? And how do you adapt to that? Now, an absolutely critical point is teams are expensive to create. to get a thriving team is a huge investment. So what we should think about is flowing work to people. Don't break a team up and start shuffling people around in the old project way. So work to teams, not people to work. That means at portfolio, we have to apply this leadership principle of delegation, of empowering, and holding people accountable for delivery. So that means we need to visualize our portfolio. What's going on where? Where's the investment? What's the framework looking like? Communicating that repeatedly and endlessly because people will get confused. Measure the value delivered. Make sure you're optimizing for the value and making sure that ROI is there. And when the information bubbles up to you, you need to act, whether it's market intelligence, whether it's impediment resolution or whatever. But that cost of delay at portfolio level becomes massive. You have to be very aware of the unintended consequences. There's a very famous thing called the Cobra effect. And this was back in colonial days when Britain was colonizing India. Moving on. There are a lot of cobras on the streets of Mumbai, then called Bombay. And so the authorities offered money for every cobra that was brought in. And so this happened, and cobras were brought in, and lots of money was paid for dead cobras. And then the streets were empty of cobras. However, the amount of money being paid out for cobras was increasing. So then they decided to stop paying for cobras, and then all the people that had been breeding cobras just turned them out on the streets. So the net effect afterwards was there were more cobras on the streets after the intervention than before. So we need to be very, very careful about nudging and changing at the scaled level. So we need to be really connected to the teams, making sure that information flows up and down so that we reduce the Cobra effect. How do we do that? We need to be communicating the value proposition at an organizational level, connecting that to the portfolio so the portfolio can show how it's delivering on the business strategy. And then each product within the portfolio should be able to demonstrate the clear pathway to the organizational value proposition. Product owners need to be consistent with the clear vision. That direction of travel has to be absolutely clear. Communicate that it's a direction of travel. It can change. The exact destination remains uncertain, but we're going that way. Make sure that the teams know the connection between what they're working on to the future goals. Ruthlessly experiment. And by ruthlessly, I mean run a hypothesis, make sure you get the learning back from the hypothesis. If you just run an experiment and let it go into wild, that's not being experimental. That's just doing stuff. So you have to make the time to validate your hypothesis, check your metrics, see what happened, and then use that feedback loop to learn. That also means that you might run an experiment and it didn't work so well, so back it out. That is wonderful experimentation. That's good science. But if you get too close to things, too emotional about it, you can say, oh, well, we spent all this money building it. We'll keep it out there. But if you keep building bad features or something that doesn't give you the ROI, you've then got to maintain it and look after it, which increases your total cost of ownership. So by being ruthless with our experimentation, if it doesn't give us the ROI we need, we remove it and then stop paying for it, right? Make sure you have a clear stakeholder communication plan. Make sure you know who your stakeholders are, and then you're going to have to market your product and your people internally. Sometimes your sprint review is not enough. You might need to think about additional comms, a newsletter, other communication to get ideas out there. Now, as a developer, when we're at scale, the focus is the same as if we're in a team, which is delivering a working increment. Now, when we're at scale, integrating becomes harder. This is where the first thing we say in all scaling courses is nail it before you scale it, right? If you cannot have one team working effectively, it's going to be really tough to get 10 teams working effectively. You will need to automate your definition of done. You are going to have to automate as much as possible. So automate environments, or automate your builds, automate your processes. Focus on the integrated whole. And so having that communication and that balance of work so that each team knows if something they're working on is depended on by another team, that can then change the priority. So that communication, there should be visibility at the portfolio level so they understand where their bit fits in the greater whole. You're going to have to share skills. Lift the technical competence of the group. Think about building networks of specific skill sets. Make it easy for people to learn and grow. That's for a single product. When we get to portfolio level, that enterprise awareness is key. What other technologies are in use? How does your product fit into the broader real estate? Cross-functional teams become even more important so that we can get things done in a team so that something can come in and be done. Your architecture becomes oh so important because the law of unintended consequences, the quick, dirty fix that lasts forever is highly probable. And this is where we can create tech debt on a massive scale. Technical debt is the cost of having to change, maintain, or alter systems due to shortcuts. Perhaps you didn't know any better, or architecting yourself into a corner that's not extensible. You need to, as developers, you need to educate your product owner and your leadership about the cost of that. One of the most famous examples of seeing the whole is this wonderfully crazy house in California called the Winchester House. Now, this house was built by the widow of the chap who invented the Winchester lever-action rifle. She became insanely wealthy, like Elon Musk wealthy back in the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. Her husband sadly died of cholera and she went quietly mad building this house with no clear vision. And you are seeing correctly that there is a door that takes you straight out the second floor. You'll see it's a beautifully well-crafted door, but a useless one. How many times have you seen this in a very large organization where there's stairs to nowhere, doors to the wrong place, etc.? So have a look at Winchester House if you want to look at further hilarious challenges of not having an architectural plan. So as a developer, you need to be an architect. You need to look beyond your immediate system architecture to the whole architecture of the organization. The most useful thing I can offer you is automate your onboarding. How easy is it for a new person joining a team to be able to start work? Can they quickly get hold of whatever your product is and start working on it? Are your assets under version control? Can they just run automations to get into the product? You, as developers, are accountable for instrumenting your product. You will need to educate your product owner of why you need to put instrumentation into your product so that you know when it's having errors, being able to get hold of error information, being able to support your help people, being able to support the support desk operations, etc., so that you should know as developers before something goes wrong. At the very least, once something does go wrong, you can get hold of the information quickly without having to do too much heavy lifting. So that means educating your product owner around the investment in the future product. Remove technical debt. Have zero tolerance on bugs. Make the system robust. Help it become anti-fragile. A great example of this is the Netflix Chaos Monkey and Chaos Gorilla, where they built a system to ensure that their infrastructure was resilient. That then brings us to the world of the Scrum Master. Now, Scrum Masters, I'm passionate about Scrum Masters, what I wrote my book about. There's a lot of myths about Scrum Mastery. You're not just there to bring the coffee and book the events, right? When it comes to scaling, you have to step up and be that true leader that serves. You're there to help team effectiveness across the organization, which means you need to be supporting your teams, your product owners, and your leaders. That means you need to build a communication network throughout the entire organization, right? You need to build that human network to help resolve problems. You need to support your team working with other teams. You need to support your product owner, help them skill up, help your product owner build a community of product owners, help your developers build a community of developers. If there's a specific skill they'd like to learn, help them do that and help them share it. Help your people grow. Support your leaders because it's tricky for them to change into this empowerment dynamic. Show them the way, walk the talk. You have to be very proactive. You have to really help your team make sure that they are delivering, getting to done, getting people to the sprint review and viewing the work done. You might have to find different ways of sharing the work, be it webcasts, recording, whatever. Make sure that your team can communicate to the organization the awesome they're doing. Work beyond your team. Collaborate with other Scrum Masters. Most importantly, get after the impediments. Make them go away. You need to find a way of communicating to the leadership the pain the impediment causes. And it's hard. It's really hard because sometimes it feels like you're just banging your head against the wall because people can't see it. That's on you. If they can't see it, you haven't explained it clearly enough. Own it, breathe, get after it again. And it's tough, I've done very well here. I've also failed miserably here. But what really counts is showing that resilience, the humility, and the resolve to keep trying. You need to work with leadership. You need to become their ally. You need to help them help the teams. They may not see it, in which case you have to keep working with them. Most importantly, you have to make change happen. Now, this is an agile change, so pull, not push. You have to create the space for the change to move into. Sort of like the same idea of aerodynamics. It's the way a wing works, right? Is air passes over the wing, and more goes under it than over it, which causes lift. That's what you're trying to do in the organization. Make the annoying path, the impediment-filled path, even more painful so people go the goods way. You might need some help doing that. Help make it easy for people to move. So as a Scrum Master, you need to start looking systemically. You need to give yourself time and space to look back and see the whole. You're looking for systemic impediments. Talking with other Scrum Masters, is there a common impediment across teams? If there's something big enough that it affects multiple teams, then it becomes a higher level product or maybe even a portfolio issue. Make it go away. Build and use an influencer map. Now, back in the days when we're always in office, the two people that I always found most valuable to build a good rapport with, receptionists, because they're the ones who know everyone, the catering manager or facilities manager, and the executive assistants to leadership. Work with them to help the organization change because there's a lot of soft power there. So know who talks to who and how to get there. As a Scrum Master, you need to deliver relentless, gentle pressure. Now, by relentless, I mean it needs to be consistent. You need to keep pushing, because unless you keep that momentum going, that gentle pressure there, inertia will take over and there'll be no change. The easiest way for you to do that is to just help information flow. Like if you can help information flow through the organization, most of the problems will solve themselves because it becomes visible. Your challenge is to make sure that people don't see it as a political thing, but as a clear, just it's information. Like this is just a fact. Try and separate the emotion from the fact. And each day, just try for a little better. One of the best leaders I worked with, he said, look, all we're trying to do each day, we just got to suck a little less. Sort of negative, positive. But by doing that, bit by bit, we become better. I think the catchphrase these days at the gym from the younger folks is marginal gains. That's what we're looking for organizationally. So if we do that marginal gain within a Scrum team, we help 10 people get better. If we're doing this at a portfolio, we can help thousands of people get better. And it's really up to you as a Scrum Master to help everyone understand that. One of my favorite philosophers is the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. And this is an interesting thing about this quote is it ties into a lot of theory of constraint stuff, things like that. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. So if we as Scrum Masters, if we are people in organizations, look to what's holding us back, that then becomes our focus to help us improve. And so that brings us to the end. It's up to you, right? If you make a small change where you are, it'll ripple through the org. And that is the essence of scaling. And now we're open for questions. I think there are some questions there, aren't they, Lindsay?
There are a lot of really good questions here. That was great, Simon. It was such a good explanation of scaling for anyone. You got a lot of great feedback here, just like that. So, so let's start here. So, why do you use the word leadership, although there is a Scrum Master responsible? In an ideal world, the product team is, I don't know this word.
I think I've got the
Autark? I don't know. And the team leads itself, right?
yes.
Autonomous, maybe.
Yeah, autonomous. Now,
Yes.
so why do I use the word leadership? We're all leaders. I think, well, if you haven't looked up, look up Jocko Willink's work on this, Extreme Ownership, and particularly the second book, The Dichotomy of Leadership. It's very powerful when everybody in the organization chooses to be a leader. We got to lead sideways, we got to lead up, we got to lead down. But it's intentionality of behavior. It's that whole purpose, constraints, trust thing. Now, I use leadership not to highlight out that there's only one accountability for it. We should all be leaders. And that means that we all have to shoulder that mantle and decide to make things a bit better. And so we could be leading in our technical domain space. It could be leading in a business space. We could be leading in a team. Now, in my experience, the biggest challenge is, somebody goes off on a course or somebody goes to a conference and then comes back and turns around to their people and go, hey, we're doing Agile, now self-manage. Sweet. How am I meant to do that? When I was at primary school, there was one teacher and 30 students. When I was at secondary school, there was one teacher and 30 students. And then I went to uni and there was one lecturer and 500 students, and there's 40 in a tutor group. And then I had a job where there was a project manager telling me what to do. And there was a brief period where I was free and, living the wild life. And then I got married. And so that ability to self-manage wasn't there. And so it's not enough just to say self-manage, be autonomous, figure it out. No, we all need to lead so that we can help each other be autonomous. That means taking accountability because nature abhors a vacuum. And if you don't make decisions, if you don't act on stuff, it's not going to happen. So we need to work as Scrum Masters, product owners, leaders, individual team members to help boost the trust in us by getting stuff done and delivering and leading. And so leadership should be throughout the organization. Another really good book on this is Turn Your Ship Around by David Marquet. And this is the essence of Lalou's work about teams.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So this question kind of dovetails into that a little bit. So lack of alignment can lead to inconsistent product development. So how do we maintain team autonomy when scaling?
Communication, and a bit more communication. What I'm hearing is that your portfolio isn't integrated. I've seen this happen too many times where for some reason, the business strategy is communicated late. The business strategy is not really clearly communicated. That means that the portfolio isn't really connected with the business strategy. And that means that the products are all just doing interesting things that either the product owner or the teams want. Now, if we don't have that clear direction of travel at the highest level from the organization, it's very easy for things to just go a little bit haywire and off track underneath that. I was fortunate enough to work with an oil and gas company, and it was wonderful because it was absolute clarity on what was going on. Right? It was all about lifting energy, creating energy, making sure it got out of the ground safely, making sure it got to the consumer safely, looking at renewables, other energy options, et cetera, et cetera. But it was all ruthlessly focused on maximizing the energy delivered and thereby the share price. So everyone's nose was pointing in the same direction and made it very easy to make decisions at portfolio level. So if we can communicate the portfolio goals and then connect our product to that, it should be more straightforward, because if our team knows which way they're going, they'll be able to self-organize. But if you don't know which way you're going, what is it the Cheshire Cat said in Alice in Wonderland? If you don't know where you're going, that's great. You can take any road because it'll get you there.
Right. Thank you. All right. So question about dependencies. So are the dependencies productive in the project? How many how do you manage dependencies between teams?
Talk to each other. Like
Communication.
yeah, it's communication again. Like the pithy answer is don't have them, right? With that and £5 will get you a coffee from Starbucks. So this is the tricky thing, right? And you'll have all these scaling patterns, like Nexus says to do it this way, and this framework says do it that way, and Scrum at Scale says do it this way. Basically, you need to have some mechanism for your teams to communicate dependencies to each other. Now, I don't care how you do it. I don't care whether it's on a Miro board, a mural board, whether you've got a sophisticated tool for it. But unless your team knows about it, you haven't done it properly. And so one of the things I favor is lightweight tools. And this is why I think the boards like Miro and Mural have become more powerful, because you can just scribble on them. Back in the good old days when we're all in offices pre-COVID, it was easy. You just grabbed 3 people and went into a room and scribbled on a whiteboard and it was clear. Now it's harder because we're globally distributed. We all working from home. So how do we make that visible? So having a board, having some sort of map laid out, there are some tools out there. The cautionary tale is if it takes more effort to keep the tool up to date than the information needed, bin the tool.
Great. Thank you.
With hopefully that was a
Yeah, I hope
vague.
that helps.
Yeah. And there
Go
are
ahead.
no perfect practices. And this is my key takeaway from this, for hopefully everyone has picked up on it, is there's no absolute, if we do it like this, we'll scale. You can't. You have to figure it out for yourself. Focus on that feedback loop and just make it work for you.
Thank you. All right. So how does the integration work with many product teams to support an organizational portfolio? Is it necessary to have a dedicated integration team to ensure pieces of increments are built into working software and product?
I'm going to have to take the cop-out answer on that of it depends.
Right.
I know that that's could be an unhelpful answer. No, the thing is that based on your portfolio, are your products discrete? Like if they're discrete, they can go out separately. So if we take Microsoft, for example, Azure DevOps releases on its own cadence every 3 weeks, bang, goes into the customer's hands. Does that impact Office 365? Not at all. So they're completely separate portfolios. So they don't touch each other. Don't have to worry about it. That's nice. When we start looking at more core products like Windows Server, they have to be far more careful of that because they've got to have that working for on-prem as well as in cloud. And so when we start seeing that, there will be a lot of automated chains in that communication. Now, depending upon your organization, an integration team may be the best solution. Like, honestly, talk to your people. If your people go, do you know what? If we had a team dedicated to building this thing and just making sure the build goes out and communicating it and finding bugs and communicating that back, if that's going to make it easier for your organization, that's the right thing to do. If somebody's put it in a blog, wrote it in a book, chucked it on a video, put it on TikTok, that's irrelevant until you've tested it. You've got to be experimental.
That makes sense. Okay, so this is kind of a cool question. This comes from Benjamin. I might start a new role as a product owner soon. Do you have any recommendations on how to integrate into the team fast?
Be curious. So if you're starting up as a product owner, basically they know you're fresh. You know what you know. Do you know anything about the product? Is there any research you can do beforehand? What's the vision? Is there a handover from the current product owner? How big's your product backlog? Oh, by the way, if your product backlog's more than a few hundred items, I'd just flush it and start again, honestly. Archive it off, come up with a product vision through to a store, canvas, do a couple of canvases with your stakeholders and your team, do a story map, start afresh, because trying to wrap your head around an existing backlog of 500 items, yeah, good luck with that. That's what I'd be tempted to do. If you can't wrap your head around the current backlog and it doesn't make sense, just declare bankruptcy, flush it, start again. You're probably not going to lose anything. Hopefully that helped.
Thank you. All right. So what recommendations do you have when the Scrum Master role revolves every 3 months? The organization does not assign these as dedicated roles, part-time in the team, developing also, and revolving every few months. Hard to grow the skills and insights to navigate the organization and impediment removal.
Yeah, that hurts.
Toughie.
Yeah, that hurts. So it's verging on agile theater. Like my definition of agile theater is where it looks like agile, but it's not really agile. And this is probably the crazy world where they've said, oh, Scrum Masters don't provide any value. We'll just let them all go and just get rid of, 1,000 years worth of organizational knowledge just walks out your org and you're wondering why things slow down. Right. So when that happens, and it's rotational, like if that's the decision of the org, what you need to do is start building up a repository of skills and understanding. One of the most powerful bits of advice ever given to me when I started consulting is your worth as a consultant is measured by the handover. So as a consultant, you're going to leave an organization as either a contractor, consultant, you're coming in there for a short period, 3 to 3 months to a year or 2 years or whatever, when you rotate out, how smoothly does your work transition to the next person? Now, if you as a Scrum Master are thinking about that handover, you'll start thinking about, well, this is work that, what experiments have you run? How does the team, what are the team like? What are they not like? The other interesting thing is, where are you going to? If you're rotating through that Scrum Master role, is it rotating around inside the team? Are you Scrum Mastering your own team or a different team? Have a discussion amongst the broader collective. This is a wonderful impediment. And if it's causing pain and cost, there's an impediment. You need to work with the leadership, make it visible, going, hey, I know you think you're saving money. However, every time you do this, every 3 months when we rotate, you cost us, say you've got 20 Scrum Masters and it takes them 2 weeks to get their head around their new team roles. So that's 10 working days times 20. That's 200 people days of work you flush every 3 months. Is that what you're really aiming for? What is it you're looking to do out of this? Have the conversation, be curious, be humble, and just gently push.
Awesome. Thank you. So I think we have time for like one more, and then we will share the rest of these with Simon, and he will figure out a way to address them in a blog post or something like that. So this question here from Scott: how do you convince an organization that they only need a single product owner? Typically, when I get involved as a coach, there are already 2 to 3 per product. It's difficult for me to convince them to let one go because, one, they don't want to do that. 2, they feel like there's enough work for 2.
Yeah, that's a tough one, because basically what you're looking at is redeploying people. And this is, you have to tread very carefully here, because this is the world of politics. Now, what you could try and find out is, are those product owners working together? Is one a senior or a junior? Are they both really working on the same product? And this is, dare I care, kick that can, is the product manager versus product owner discussion, where one's more outward looking and one's more team focused. All decisions like that are emotional, not rational, in my experience, because somebody's made a decision to build that structure. So what you're looking for is, first of all, the data to support the fact that one single person can do all the work. What it smells like to me, like a lot of teams, the actual Scrum team is probably not taking enough accountability in the refinement. There might be some pay grade issues. There might be some stuff like that going on. So gathering your data is the first step. The second thing is trying to understand the emotion behind the decision. And then being able to present an argument that appeals to both the emotion and the rational in such a way that the people are not harmed. Now, sometimes it might just be that some people are going to be made redundant. If your organization you're working with doesn't have the appetite for that, you're on a hiding to nothing chasing that one. So you really want to sound that out cautiously and find out where the motivations are and how much appetite the org is going to invest in that, and work on it piece by piece. That is a really tough organizational coaching challenge. But I'd be looking at total cost of ownership. I'd be looking at spend. I'd be looking at decision latency for the numbers. And for emotion, I'd be trying to build a stakeholder map and understand the politics of what I'm about to do, because you're going to kick an interesting can when you say, there should be only one.
That's great advice. Thank you. I hope that helps. All right. So we are at our time. Thank you so much, Simon, for taking the time today. This was really, really great. And thank you, audience, for all the great questions. I will share these with Simon, and we will figure out a way to get them addressed for you. And The recording of this will be in your inbox within 24 hours, and it will also be on Scrum.org later today. All right, so thank you, Simon. Thank you, everyone, and Scrum on, and stay connected.